My first couple years in radio, I was so animated because I thought you had to have this like radio voice, right? Like you had to be like, I'm so happy to be here. This is amazing.
The beginning of your party music marathon with money in the music. Friday, my attitude is showing.
Like, in reality, this is a radio voice, like me just talking to you and just being, authentic and genuine. You don't have to have this crazy like radio voice.
98.9.
You don't have to have this personality. Just be yourself.
Hello, everyone. Joining us today is Brooke Taylor, an on-air talent with 16 years of experience. From starting her own radio station at her alma mater, Lander University, from Disney to now iHeartRadio, she is definitely answered her calling in radio. So we are so happy for her to be here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Stephanie, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to do this.
Yes, so we all want to know, how did you get into radio? How did it all start?
So it's actually a funny story. I was an athletic training major when I first got into college. I played volleyball on scholarship at a small D2 school in South Carolina, and I thought that athletics in some way, shape, or form was what I wanted to do for my entire life. So I was like, yeah, athletic training, that sounds fun. Let's do this. Walked into school, took my first anatomy class, and was like, this ain't it, sister. Like, I'm not cut out for this. So I was undecided pretty much for a little while. And right before one of my volleyball matches, one of the guys who did our public announcing for, he announced our games, he was like, come over here. I'm about to start this radio club. Do you want to join it? And I was like, cool, sounds fun. Let's do it. And we kind of birthed our radio station at our college, and my career in radio really started literally at that moment. So yeah, Paul Crutcher, I tell him all the time that he is the reason that I do what I do today. So shout out to Paul. I love you.
Shout out to Paul. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And from there, I mean, now that you became undecided, did you go into communications or did you do journalism?
Yeah, I switched to mass communications. So I ended up graduating with a communications major and almost a minor in Spanish. I did not finish my credits to get the minor, but yeah, I was a communications major. Yeah.
Then after graduation, what then led you into going into Disney, or what was there another radio before that?
Yeah, so I graduated college and I moved home to where my parents lived in Gainesville, Florida, and I had no idea what I was going to do. Like any other college student, you're kind of like, okay, now it's time for me to find a job. So I actually had a friend who was working at a urology office, and she was like, I can get you a job. I was working the front desk, checking in people for a lot of things that I don't need to talk about, but you can imagine at a urology office what goes on there. And I was just like, this can't be my life. Like, this is not what I'm doing out of school. So my dad actually came home one day and he was just like, there's a radio station down the street that's hiring for a night DJ. You should go out for it. And I was just like, I mean, okay, like, what do I have to lose? So I literally walk into this radio station with my resume that had nothing on it but like serving bartending experience, and then my college radio station and this urology job. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I will learn if you will teach me. And they, for whatever reason, believed in me, and they gave me my first job right out of college. I was making $11 an hour in Gainesville, Florida, living with my parents. It was awesome, but I learned a lot at that radio station. I started in Top 40 radio, and I was kind of part-time in the beginning. They were teaching me how to like produce commercials and what being in the studio looked like, how to operate the board, taking phone calls, editing the phone calls, adding, sound effects and everything to different commercials and things like that, and how to do all of that. And they let me, it's called voice tracking, where you like record like a shift in advance. So they let me voice track the overnight show. So I was on the air from like midnight to like 4 a.m. And so I would pre-record that and kind of learn how to talk on the radio. And then they were like, okay, tomorrow night you're going live 7 to midnight. So I was in the studio all by myself, in the building all by myself from 7 to midnight, Monday through Friday. And that's what I did for a little over a year.
Wow, that's so interesting that that's what they do. I always wondered that. I'm like, do they actually just like
some people are in there from midnight to 4 a.m, but they were very nice to let me all of the show, so I didn't have to be there that early.
How was that transition going from just being like a radio host to now you were basically producing a show?
It was daunting because when I was doing my college radio station, it was just like you talk in between the songs and you're like hanging out with a friend and you're not really it's not really a lot of pressure. But when it came to, producing my own show and getting callers and all the things, yeah, it became a lot, but it was really nice to have somebody teach me all of the things and really just kind of be there when I needed like to answer questions and things like that. But it was a lot of pressure in the beginning. I was very nervous.
I was gonna ask you that. I was like, all right, your first live, like you going live, like how did it go? I mean, you said you were nervous. I mean, what exactly happened then at that moment when you went live?
Whenever I was on the radio, I would say my first couple years in radio, I was so animated because I thought you had to have this like radio voice, right? Like you had to be like, I'm so happy to be here. This is amazing. Like in reality, this is a radio voice, like me just talking to you and just being, authentic and genuine. So my perspective changed a little bit as the years went on, that I didn't have to have this like boasting personality all the time. I was like, take a deep breath, sister, just relax a little bit and just chill out a little bit.
Like, did you learn that or did somebody mention it to you? Like, when did you realize, like, okay, you know what, maybe I need to take a step back?
It was one of my mentors at one of my second market that I worked in. One of my mentors, still to this day, Phil. He was just like, you don't have to have this crazy like radio voice, like, you don't have to have this personality. He's just like, just be yourself. That's all people want to hear. Is they just want to be, with somebody that's chatting with them during their work day or wherever you are. And one of the best pieces of advice that he gave me was, when you're sitting in a passenger and you're hanging out and talking to the driver, he was just like, pretend like you're in the passenger seat talking to that driver instead of like yelling at them. And I was like, okay, that's good advice.
So then afterwards, what then led you to then leaving that radio station to pursue something bigger?
So back then, Twitter had just been born. My very first radio gig, Twitter was like very new. So I was on Facebook and Twitter like during my shift. And I remember, and it sounds crazy right now to say this, but I would get in trouble for being on social media when I was like on my show because nobody understood what it was. So I remember them saying like, you're doing too much. Stop posting these things. Like you need to be focusing on your show. And I just started kind of networking with other radio personalities and just learning and saying like, hey, let me put together an air check of all of my things and like send it to you. And can you listen to it and tell me how I can get better? Because
And air check is kind of just like a portfolio bit, right? Just like
yeah,
a
so
little
basically it's just little
reel.
snips of your show. Yeah, it's like a reel of your show. Just all of your different breaks put together in like a 3-minute clip. And I would just send it to people and be like, can you listen to this and critique me? Tell me how I can get better. And I randomly sent it to there was a group, it was called Radio Peeps on Facebook, and we all like just kind of chatted about things and gave each other different ideas on topics and things to talk about on our shows. And this guy messaged me one day, his name's Nugget, and he was just like, hey man, would you ever want to move to Fort Wayne, Indiana? And I was like, no, I've never heard of that place. No, thank you. So this guy calls me and he's just like telling me about the job. And I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you, Fort Wayne, Indiana, I think that sounds terrible. Like, I don't think I want to live there. And he was just like, the worst thing you could get out of this is a trip to Fort Wayne, Indiana to meet people and say you hate it, then you go back home and you don't take the job. But he flew me up to Fort Wayne, Indiana. I had my
Nice.
interview and met everybody at the radio station, and I just like fell in love with the people there. And literally I flew back to Gainesville, Florida, put in my 2 weeks, and I packed up my little my little Chrysler Sebring convertible with everything that I had, and I drove myself to Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's where I stayed for the next couple of years. My boss at the time, Phil, he's one of my mentors still to this day. He was so kind and so generous with all of the knowledge that he knows. And he taught me about programming. So about, kind of the backside of radio, not just being the host, but also like programming music and being on calls with record labels and going to dinners and things like that, and just networking with people within the industry. And he was just like a wealth of knowledge, and he's just one of the smartest people, I think. And
Mhm.
he always was just, I feel like he was always like 10 years ahead of people. And he just really taught me, he just taught me a lot about who you are as a talent, and finding what my voice was. He was like, there's so many voices on the radio, but like, who are you? Who do you
Mhm.
want to talk to? Who do you want people to relate to when they hear your voice? What do you want people to know you for? And he just taught me to be bold and to make, you know, mistakes. And he always said this quote, he always said, fail harder, because he was like, if you're not failing, you're not learning. So he was just like, so fail.
Wow.
And when you fail, fail
Mm.
hard. I was very comfortable in Fort Wayne. Like, I thought I was going to be there for a while. I was dating somebody at the time. I was just comfortable. I was, you know, just really loving my job. I was making nothing. So
Really?
I literally joke to people. I'm like, if you want to work in radio, make sure you're ready to live off of Pop Tarts and ramen noodles for 5 to 6 years before you make an actual salary. One day, my boss, Phil, at the time, he calls me into his office and he was like, close the door. And I go, I'm about to get fired. I was like, you don't close his door unless something bad is about to happen.
Mhm.
So he was like, close the door. And then I sit down and I'm just like, my heart is racing. I'm like, what is he about to tell me? So he sits me down. He was just like, yeah, this person's looking for, you know, a jock out here in California. And I think you'd be really good for the job. And I don't want to lose you, but you're too big for Fort Wayne. And I'm going to need you to apply for this job. And I was just like, my boss is telling me to leave. What? But I think that's what's so great, that he was just such a great leader in that aspect, where he didn't want to hold anybody back. He was just like, you deserve to continue on and flourish where you can flourish. And he was just like, you learned everything you need to learn here. Now it's time to go somewhere else. So he put me in contact with Radio Disney, and that's where I went next. And I applied for that job, and it was like a 6 month process. Like it took a while
Wow.
for everything to happen. It was definitely challenging because I was in a very, you know, I was in a like 3 year relationship, and I was just like, I'm about to move to California. This is crazy. So it was very, very uncomfortable, but it ended up just being such a cool move, moving out to California. And Radio Disney was such a different thing because it wasn't just radio. We were on Disney
Mhm.
Channel, we were on red carpets every weekend, we were at movie junkets, we were literally at the coolest things. And like, you know, I could go from interviewing Angelina Jolie to like Pharrell. Like, it was just like
Oh.
we had access to everybody, and we were on camera, and I learned like how to speak in front of a camera and things like that. It
Mhm.
was just really, I mean, a little girl in my mid-20s, you know, I was just like, this
Mhm.
is cool. It was definitely one of those like pinch me dream moments.
Wow, that sounds really cool. I mean, so you said that the process was like 6 months. Like, did you have to like, audition? Was it just like a very lengthy auditioning?
Yeah,
Or
they
what?
were interviewing, I don't know how many people, but there was lots of interviews. And then once you pass the first interview process, and they flew you out to do an interview in person. And then the interview in person was basically an audition. I was like interviewing my new boss. He was just like, okay, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to prep for an interview, and you're interviewing me. And I was just like, cool, this is really awkward and difficult, but I'm going to make it happen. And yeah, just touring, because it wasn't just the radio portion of it. Like, we were in the Disney ABC building, so we were like, the lot is next door, and they're taking you on a big tour of the lot, and you're seeing movie sets and TV sets and things, and I'm like, where am I? This is nuts. But yeah, it was a really cool experience.
Is super cool. I mean, what was some of your favorite moments? I mean, interviewing Angelina Jolie, that's awesome.
Well,
You're
and
just like, what?
that was one of my first interviews too. So I had never done a movie.
Really? That was one of your first interviews?
My first interviews when
How
I
was
moved
that?
to
Okay.
Hollywood, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, tell me. I mean, that's completely different. I mean, starting going live in Gainesville. Now you're in Disney. Radio Disney. What was that first experience like for you?
It was terrifying and very embarrassing. So, I don't know if you know what a movie junket is, but basically they like set you up, say it's like at the Beverly Hills Hotel. They're like different rooms that they have set up, and they have these huge lights, right? And they're like, okay, this actor is going to be in this room, this actor is going to be in this room, this actor is going to be in this room, all from this movie. So the movie that it was at the time was Maleficent. And so they were like, oh, you're going to go to the Maleficent movie junket, prepare interviews for Angelina Jolie and then the other, actors on the show. And I was just like, all right, cool. And so I show up, I'm in jeans. Do you remember those like green utility like cargo jackets? They were like all the rage back then.
Yeah.
I was on it.
They were like really baggy.
Had on jeans, a tank top, and one of those utility jackets. My hair was like half up, half down. I was not like movie star glam. And then I get there, and all of these other interviewers are in like gowns and like pretty dresses, and like they've got full beat makeup on. And I'm like,
Oh.
where am I? I look ridiculous. I was just like, I'm so underdressed. I had no idea where to go. And so I get up to this thing and then they're like, okay, they walk you in. And then like Angelina Jolie is my first interview sitting right there. And I'm just like, my voice is so shy. My voice is like this. I'm like, so can you tell me about this thing? And I was so embarrassed. Like, not embarrassed maybe, but I was just very like, I don't belong here. It was like lots of imposter syndrome. And it was
It is like nobody told you the memo. You were like, why didn't nobody
Nope.
say anything?
They were like, let's throw her in. Let's just push her off the deep end. And
Let's
it
just
was,
see if she sings for fun.
yes. And it was amazing. It was awesome. And I'm being really mean to myself saying all these things, but it was just like, that's what I felt in those moments. But it was such a cool experience. And I mean, I would not have gotten to where I was after that if I didn't have that experience. So I'm grateful for it. But yeah, it was a lot. I'm in jeans and these girls are in these like $300 dresses. I'm like, cool, cool, cool. Me and my American Eagle jeans and my little platform sandals.
What was the biggest learning lesson at that moment?
I think I just learned that how to like command a room. Like I was just like, I remember that feeling of going into that interview and just feeling out of place. And nobody else knows that you're feeling that because you're supposed to be there in their eyes. They're like, oh, this person's the interviewer. Great. Come on in, sit in this chair. We'll press record and then we'll send you the footage when it's over. And I think just the confidence in commanding a room and walking in and being like, yep, I'm supposed to be here. I'm going to pretend, even if I don't feel like it, I'm going to pretend like I'm supposed to be here asking Angelina Jolie how it feels to play Maleficent. Like, it was just the craziest thing. But I think that experience first it was actually kind of a sweet moment to just be like, you're here, you're in Hollywood, and it doesn't make sense that you're here in Hollywood about to do this crazy thing. But I think from then on, it was just like, no, they chose me to have this job because they believe in me. So just really kind of, I think it just boosted my confidence after that. After I got away from the initial feeling of just, what am I doing here? I think after that,
Yeah.
it just kind of helps me boost my confidence a little bit.
Obviously, people just say these things. The stigma of Hollywood is just like you feel like you're constantly competing all the time, or you feel like you're not good enough. It's like, how did you break away from all the self doubt? Or, oh, I have to look this way, I have to sound this way.
I think it's a lot. And I think part of my story is all of the things that you're saying, because after I was in Hollywood for, I think it was close to 3 years, I was feeling those things. I was burnout. I was working way too much. I was working 7 days a week. I always was on a red carpet. I was always doing this. I was always doing that. And I was comparing myself to everybody else. There was always somebody younger and more, who had more followers on social media that would come up. And it was always the comparison game of like, why are they having this opportunity when this is mine to have, and all the things. And that actually is part of my story on why I left LA, is because I wasn't happy. I was happy with my job. Like, I was so grateful for the opportunities that I had, but I was just like missing something. Like, I wasn't being fulfilled in what I do. I was just like, they could take somebody else and put them where I am and they could do just as good of a job. And like, I just felt like I wasn't making an impact on people. It was just like, oh, you're doing the interview, you're doing this. It was like a box to check. So I don't know. Those feelings that you're mentioning, I remember feeling those all the time, where I would be leaving work, my dream job, making 6 figures a year. Like, I was making so much money in my 20s and I was just like so unhappy. And I think it was that like LA mentality of, it's a constant grind. Like, I had a really hard time making friends outside of work. I had so many close friends at work, but outside of work, I didn't know what that looked like. Like, I didn't have community. I didn't have people that had my back and people that I was like doing life with. It was just like, okay, I have my work friends, which all are just some of my closest friends to this day. Like, I love all of my friends from there, but I was just having a really hard time kind of, I guess, finding my identity in who I was. And so, yeah, I quit that job. My boss in LA when I was at Disney was so kind. I went to his office crying my eyes out. I was so nervous to talk to him and I was just like, I want out of my contract. And he could have been like, no, or he could have been like, great, and then here's a penalty. And I don't even remember if there was like a penalty on the contract. Um I don't think that there was, but it's just kind of like it's almost like a security blanket of like, if I sign this contract, I know that I have a job for 3 years, right? And then if they fire
Okay.
me at any point, they have to pay me for the rest of my contract kind of situation is like what it's for. But I went in and was like, I want to leave. And he was just like, I'm not gonna make you like, he had kids, he understood. He was just like, "I'm not gonna make you stay here if you don't wanna be here." He was just like, "So if you
Mhm.
need to leave, let's get you out of here. Like, tell me what you need. Like, when do you wanna go? Like, let's figure this out. Let's write an addendum in your contract and let's both sign it to get together." Quit that job and moved back to Fort Wayne, Indiana. Yeah, so Phil actually had left by then, so he wasn't there anymore, but, another guy I worked with, Randy, he was still there, and I called Randy and I said, "Hey, this sounds crazy, but would you be willing to give me my old job back?" And like, what do you know that the position was available? Like, and then fast forward like 4 months, one of my mentors from like back in the day in Florida, he calls me and he's just like, "Hey, there's a job opening in Chicago with iHeart and I think you should go like apply." And I was just like, I just got here. Like, I just got back to Fort Wayne. Like, there's no chance I can do that. And he was very persistent. He calls me back and he's like, "This is one of those conversations where you're going to listen to me and you're not going to say a word." He was like, "You don't belong in Fort Wayne. You belong in Chicago and you're going to go interview for this job." And I was just like, all right, what's the worst I can do? And I goes to the interview and leave with an offer. Monday, I went into my friend Randy, "You're going to hate me." And he didn't. Randy is so great. It was like, "I knew you weren't going to be here for long, but I didn't think it was only going to be 4 months." So it was very, very kind of him. And he was just like, "Go, you deserve this. You're better than Fort Wayne, Indiana. Get out of here." And moved to Chicago. And that's where I started my career in iHeart. Yeah.
So all right. So now you're in iHeart and now you're in country. Oh,
Yeah.
how different was that from every experience that you've had?
Man, it was night and day. It was crazy
Really?
different. Yeah. The artists in country music, I don't want to say that, pop music was different in a bad way, but I just felt like, I don't know, country music when I just started, it just felt like this warm hug in the weirdest way where, the artist
Me too.
remember your name when they walk in the studio. They know about your family. They follow you on social media. They keep up with your life. They like genuinely care about you. And as when it was top 40 music, not everybody, but there was people that were just like, "Why am I here? I don't want to be in this. I don't want, how long is this interview going to take?" Kind of thing. And I think I was exposed to just so many interviews all the time when I worked at Disney to where it was just a lot. It was almost just like repetition to the point where I was just exhausted from it. So I think
Mhm.
I just kind of got jaded by it all. I was just like, I don't want to do interviews right now for like the foreseeable future. Like, I just need to take a break. And I think
Mhm.
that was
Right.
nice in Fort Wayne because nobody ever came through Fort Wayne. And if they did, like, it was a phone call. Like, it was a phone call interview. It was never like an in-person one. And yeah, moving to Chicago was definitely nice because we got back into like the in-person artist interviews, like backstage at concerts kind of thing. And I don't know, country music is what I grew up listening to, so I just think it was
Mhm.
a natural fit. It was it just felt good. I don't know how to explain it, but it just felt good.
Yeah, like I don't know. It sounds like nostalgic. Like it's things that you grow up listening. You're like,
Yeah.
wow, now I get to actually meet the artists that I've been listening to since I've grown up, and
Yes.
thank God
Yeah.
they're actually really nice. You know.
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
So it's a one one thing that I want to know is like as far as like you're saying you've done so many interviews, and I mean at one point I feel like you start asking the same questions. as a professional, how do you think you are able to ask the right questions? What's like your biggest tips for that?
I think for me, it's just being someone that the person can trust. Because I feel like when an artist or a celebrity, if you will go into an interview, they're constantly on almost like on guard because they're like, what is this person going to ask me? Like, what kind of moment are they trying to get viral on social media? And it's funny because whenever I talk to, the artist or, the person's representative or, whoever it is for their PR company, I'm like, I will never be the TMZ interview. Like, I'm never trying to catch somebody off guard and make them say something that's going to go viral. Like, I just want to genuinely have a conversation with you and I want you to be comfortable to answer those questions. I don't ever want to be like, whatever question it is to make me go viral. And there are people in the industry that do that. That's their thing. That's their shtick. They love to like make those moments and awkward moments happen. But I want, the Thomas Rhetts of the world to come into the studio and be like, man, I just love having a conversation with Brooke. And they're just always going to tell me more regardless because it's a genuine conversation instead of like a viral conversation moment that you're trying to create. So I think one of the biggest things for me is like go in prepared for interviews, but don't feel like you have to stick to your list of questions. I think I used to get in that mindset where I would have a list of questions. I would ask the question, they would answer the question, and then I would move to the next question. And then they would answer the next question. It was just kind of the same thing over and over again. But instead of like focusing on what you're going to ask next, listen to what they're going to say and listen to what they're responding with, and then ask a question out of that. Like, there's always a good follow up that you could ask them from something that they said. Like, if they're like, yeah, it was my daughter's birthday this weekend and we just had a really good time. Everything's great. Tell me about your daughter's party. What was the theme? You know what I mean? And just kind of like go deeper in that. So I think just responding instead of instead of just going to the next question, I think is always such great advice because I don't think a lot of people do that.
No, I hey, as someone that's over here doing this podcast, I completely understand what you're saying. Were there anything else, like classes or courses or books or anything that you felt like helped you improve to become a better radio host?
I don't think any books or classes or anything. I honestly think it was just the repetition and not being afraid for people to critique you. I think in radio it's really easy to kind of fall into a comfort level and not hear certain, not even a mistake, but just certain crutches that you have or certain tendencies that you have. And if you're willing to let people kind of pour into that and say, hey, you know what? You kind of say this a lot. Maybe you should try and, be a little bit more, I don't know, choice with your words, like say something different. But one of my things was just always sending out my air checks to not just people in my office, but people in other markets and saying like, hey, what do you hear? Put a fresh, set of ears on this and critique me and give me your feedback and let me know what you think about this. And I think that really helped me ultimately just kind of discover who I am and just be better at what I do.
No, it's so true. Just getting that feedback. I mean, seeing how things have evolved. I mean, in at the universities now, and now there's like specific majors and like specific classes for you to take. What would your advice be for somebody that's like, man, I really want to be on radio?
I think,
Um, would they have to pursue something specific, or do you think the way you started, just kind of like jumping into it?
yeah, I mean, I think for sure in school, I learned things about radio. I learned, legality stuff like about the FCC and like all of these things. But I think when it comes to doing this like on a mic, I don't think that you can teach that. I think it's just getting in a studio and getting repetition. So, like, if your college does have a radio station, join it, ask them for a show, sit in the studio and watch people talk, or find a local radio station around you and don't go in and be like, hey, I want to be on the radio right now. Just be like, can I just shadow you? Can I watch you? I think that's a huge thing. And I know that like internships at radio stations sometimes happen. I don't think they happen as often anymore. But I think getting in a studio or asking questions, find a jock that will say like, yeah, come sit in the studio with me and let me show you how I do things. Or record some things and send it off for people to listen to, because there's so many programs nowadays where you can pretend like you're on the radio and just like talk and figure things out that way, and kind
Wow.
of record yourself and send it away and say like, hey, what do you think about this? Or even on social media, like podcasting is a huge thing now. Like, start a podcast, just start talking so
Mhm.
you get that repetition. And yeah, I think just the actual doing of talking into a microphone instead of just saying that you want to, like, just
Right.
get in front of a microphone and start. I think that's the best advice I could give to somebody, because there's not really a book that can teach you how to
Right.
do this.
And, so going into changing the subject a little bit and kind of going back to what you were mentioning about the money. One of the biggest questions we ask, just for our listeners so they could be aware before going into the profession, is what is the average income that you could be making, or what's the highest and what's the lowest that you could make as far as a on air talent?
Wish I knew what the highest was because it's not what I make. I feel like
I guess, like, in your situation from Disney, you said you felt like you were making the most at Disney versus you said $11.
yes, girl, $11. Like, I think it depends on what market you're in. Like, honestly, like, you
Mhm,
can't live in Fort Wayne, Indiana and expect to make six figures, because it's just not going to happen, right? Like, I mean, it could happen maybe in a different career, but in radio, unless you're a nationally syndicated show, I just don't think that that's something you should be expecting.
mhm.
But especially too in Gainesville, Florida, I was in market, like, gosh, I don't even remember what market level it was. It was 100 and something. And I was making $11 an hour there. And I was, working 40 hours a week, making $11 an hour. And I was not making a lot of money. Thank God I was living with my parents at the time and I didn't have that many bills to pay. But then moving to Fort Wayne, and I think my starting salary there, sorry if anybody is watching from Fort Wayne, I was making $25,000 a year. So
Wow.
maybe that was $11 an hour ish. I don't even know what that math
Mhm,
equates to, but I it was definitely not a lot of money. And I feel like
mhm.
radio, you can make a lot of money. Like Ryan Seacrest, for God's sakes, is a millionaire. You know what I mean? But he's on every radio station in the world pretty much. And the man has a following. So it's like there's money to be made for sure. My pay now is comfortable. I pay my bills with it as an adult mom of two kids, and
Mhm.
my husband has his own job too, but I think that it depends on the market you're in. If you're in a really, really small market, I don't think you should be aiming to make $80,000 a year, just because it's just not a just depends on the market,
Yeah.
honestly, because, it's like Chicago and New York are the biggest markets. Chicago is one of the bigger markets. Nashville's kind of
Mhm.
in the top, I would say third-ish. But yeah, I think you can make good money in radio with other things, with endorsements and with appearances and with all of the extras that come along with it. But your base salary, unfortunately, in radio is not going to be this like crazy thing where you're like, yeah, that's all I do. We all got multiple streams of income, honey. Like, we all have to have a bunch of different things to do. But it's a passion thing. Like, if you're passionate about your job and you're passionate about what you do, the money will come. And I think that's in anything really. But yeah, I think it really just depends on what kind of market you're in. And then unfortunately, like, if you're not willing to move around for the job in radio, then I would say get comfortable with making the money you're making in that city,
Yeah.
because as far as raises and stuff go, every company is different, but especially those smaller companies that I was working for before, like, there was no bonus structure. You're not making,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? You can make more
Yeah.
money if you get more endorsements and they sell a bunch of stuff on your show, but I think you have to prove yourself valuable, not just on the air, but then also off the air, in the community, on social media. Yeah, there's just so many different ways to do that in radio, but yeah.
How do you get endorsements? That's interesting. How do you yeah.
So so
How
it
do you even get
so in radio, we all have a sales team for, the cluster or whatever station that you're on. And basically the salespeople, they go out and they pitch radio sales, right? So they want to pitch ads on the radio. They want to pitch they want you to buy a radio, they want you to buy commercials to play during each person's show, and then say like it's a, for example, like I did an endorsement last year with California Closets, and that was them coming to California Closets and saying, "Hey, we want to run commercials on your radio station. We also want one of the personalities to speak for us." And then it was just kind of like here's our personalities. You can meet them if you want. Choose the one you want. They chose me, and then we did a project together, like, renovating my primary bedroom's closet. So like there's like
Wow.
perks along the way when it comes to that,
That's cool.
but you are also in competition with your fellow radio, people. Like, so all of the other jocks in my market, like, I love them, but I want to be better than them because I want people to pick me, for an endorsement or whatever, because those are the ways I feel like endorsements are such a pivotal role in making extra money
Mhm.
and really just kind of like driving your value up.
Is there any other memorable moments in your career?
So my grandmother was the one that kind of like growing up, we called her Nanny. So Nanny growing up, she loves country music, and Tim McGraw was like her guy. Like that was like her favorite human being in the world.
Mhm.
So we would always, I remember driving around in Nanny's little Ford truck. It was like this little red truck, and she'd always be playing this song from Tim McGraw called "I Like It, I Love It." And after she passed away, that was one of the songs we played at her funeral because like it was just Nanny's song. Like that just encompassed who she was. So I remember when I was in Chicago, we were at this music festival in Wisconsin, and we were all just kind of, it was the morning show, it was me, it was like basically our whole radio station, and Tim McGraw was playing. And the morning show, one of the girls, bless her heart, she had a little too much to drink. So they were like, "Brooke, you're going to do the Tim McGraw interview." And I was just like, "Bet, like I'm down, let's go." So we were walking to the like little backstage area, and we always said, like growing up, like after my grandma passed away, she always smoked Marlboro Light cigarettes. So anytime that I got a whiff of like a Marlboro Light cigarette, I always like say, "Hi, Nanny." Like she's here. She's like saying hi to us. We were walking into this backstage area. There's literally nobody around. And I get a whiff of like Marlboro Light cigarette. And I was just like, my grandma is freaking out in heaven right now. Like she is like, you're joking me. So I just remember doing this Tim McGraw interview backstage, just like he was, Tim McGraw is Tim McGraw. Like I was freaking out. And it was one of those cool moments because I got a whiff of that cigarette smoke, and I was just like, yeah, she knows that I'm
Did you
interviewing.
mention it? Did you mention it to him,
I
like about your
did.
grandma?
I did, yeah. And he was so sweet. And I just remember he was just so kind in that interview. And he was just he had his leg propped up on this table, and he was just talking to me. And it was just one of the easiest interviews I think I ever did. And it was just really cool because I just felt like my grandma was there with us, just like, just like she's there sitting
Oh,
like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy." But yeah, that was one of my most memorable moments in, I think everything that I've done so far.
no, that is a precious moment. I mean, working with so many celebrities, have you ever been like starstruck?
Yes. Tim McGraw, for example. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I did an album release party a couple years ago with Carrie Underwood, and she's just unbelievable. Like she's country music, she's one of the biggest superstars on the planet. And yes, I mean, there's all the time where somebody walks into a room and I'm like, they are here literally to talk to me. Like, this is crazy. So it happens all of the time. And I don't think it's ever anything I'll take for granted, because it's just a really cool thing to be like, I just got to talk to Kane Brown, or I got to talk to Tim
Yeah.
McGraw, Carrie Underwood, like you name it, Thomas Rhett, like all of these huge superstars. It's just like, it's such a cool job.
Any additional advice, anything that you think that they need to do today, to get to that point of becoming that on-air talent?
I think just be bold. I think that's one of the things in this industry people want to see. They want you to be memorable. And if you're just like anybody else, they're just going to say, "Okay, well, let's move on to the next thing." Walk into a radio station with your resume. call the manager, whoever it is, you know what I mean? Like, I know you can apply to things online and that's great, but like see if you can get ears to like hear your voice, you know what I mean? And I think just being bold and not being afraid to suck a little bit. I feel like everybody wants to be perfect, but I think that's what's so great about radio and why I don't think it's ever going to go anywhere is that we're human beings and human beings aren't perfect all the time. So if you make a little flub up in a break, like I never apologize for messing up on the radio because I'm like, I'm a human being. I am not a robot. I am not artificial intelligence. I am going to say things and stumble over my words sometimes. And I think that also makes you a little bit more relatable. But yeah, I think just being bold is so important in this industry and not being afraid to just, knock someone's door down and be like, hey, I want this opportunity. Give me a shot.
Thanks for clocking in with us. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you got a career you'd like to see, message us on Instagram. We're always listening. Till next time, it's time to clock out.